Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I hope everyone in our audience and, of course, all of our speakers are healthy and well. It is important right now for team members to feel valued, engaged, connected, and to be presented transparent and consistent communications. That is true all of the time, but again, it is particularly important right now during our current crisis. Also, I'll reference a rather old statistic, but a valued one from Harvard Business Review, that close work friendships boost employee satisfaction by 50%. So outside of all the FaceTime happy hours and Zoom meetings, how are we connecting to create and sustain those relationships while working remotely? Today, we've gathered individuals from different organizations to discuss how each, no matter our role, have a responsibility towards team building and that team's happiness. I'll ask each of our panelists a few questions and then open the discussion for questions from the audience. Our speaker bios are in the chat, and you just saw the title slide with all of their names and titles. And so I'll begin by asking a question to each of our panelists today, beginning with Marianne. How have you found the way your teams or the teams you are on changed by the current crisis? And I'll ask it first of Marianne and then ask each of our speakers.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I think primarily is that we now have an emergency task force to deal with the shutdown of Bard Graduate Center, and we operate both as a graduate program as well as the gallery. So we're dealing with those two different cohorts, our public visitors as well as the students and faculty. And I think what it has done is this task force has brought together everyone across the whole institution. So I'm on that task force. And it really is a way that we're communicating not only about the immediate emergency, you know, as of 2 weeks ago or a little before that we started, but also now turning more towards community engagement. And I will talk more about that later.
And Allison, the same question. How have you found the way your teams or the teams you're on changed by the current crisis?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. I can say both our curatorial team and the museum at large have moved to implement many digital strategies. A really unique one is our monthly all-staff meeting. It's gone virtual. So the first one that we had, there were probably a couple of hundred people on Zoom. And it was a really effective team building tool to be able to see everyone and to connect face to face. That was, you know, in the early few days of us working remotely. And then our curatorial team is also hosting our weekly meetings on Zoom. There have been some really fun subject-specific Slack channels that our team is hosting. One of them is called Remote Working Chronicles, where we're sharing our favorite recipes, photos of pets, kids, you know, just like a fun way to connect while not actually physically being in the offices.
And Grace, how about AAM?
Sure, so we're doing some combinations of all of those things. We have some task force in place to look at how we're responding to the crisis. But we are also utilizing Slack, having fun channels, sharing our pets and our kids and our activities, our resources, finding ways to just kind of have that human connection. We're also making sure that in our check-ins, you know, we are recognizing that people are just in different emotional spaces. And so making sure we're having time to check in, see how people are doing, and leading with that, kind of leading with our humanity, I think has been really important. And being able to just respond to that and recognizing that sometimes your meetings might have to be flexible. You know, we had a meeting scheduled where, you know, we ended up spending 40 minutes of the meeting just really connecting and offering support to each other because that's what was actually really needed in that moment. And so just kind of keeping that in mind and recognizing that when people are working from home, their capacity to work is very different. You don't necessarily have all the tools and resources in your home space, but you also have families and pets, and I'm sure my cat might make an appearance at some point today too. So, and just being gentle, I think, with each other.
And Felicity at NYFA?
Yeah, so I think yes to all of the things that are happening. And I think also there's definitely a recognition that, you know, ultimately not everyone is working at their highest and best. That, you know, we're open to things happening that are not necessarily the way it might supposed to be, but it's just, you know, there's a lot going on in people's lives, as has already been said, in terms of family responsibilities and all of those things. So I think there's a real compassion coming through from all of our projects, and we're also working and supporting each other cross department in a way that's you know, really geared at supporting the community, but it's also sort of creating a really compassionate space for our institution, and also just acknowledging that we miss seeing each other in person. And one of our staff members in fiscal sponsorship, Madeline Controna, she actually suggested an open meeting like every Friday where we could just join, and it doesn't matter if everyone's on it or not, or it's just a way to say hi and check in. And this has been a way for our executive level staff to really share out important updates about what we're doing in terms of the stability of the organization, which for all staff members is obviously a concern, and being able to kind of give updates in a very informal kind of family-like environment has been really impactful.
Thank you. And thinking of that human aspect of it, and thinking about, you know, we're all individuals, we're all dealing with, and yes, my dog might make an appearance, although I gave him a big lunch, so he might not. How are you as an individual thinking about and changing how you are working and participating as a team member, as, you know, not just someone that someone else reports to, but really as someone that's pinch hitting, maybe relieving leadership, maybe helping out? How are you individually changing? And knowing that each of you are at various different size organizations and different locations, I think it'll be interesting to hear that varying perspective. And this time I'll start with Allison.
Sure. Well, you know, it's interesting. So I don't have, outside of our curatorial assistant who supports our whole team, I don't have any direct reports. So management for me isn't really something that comes up in this shift. But one interesting thing, Hank Willis Thomas's mid-career survey is on view right now at Crystal Bridges. And I was the in-house curator. It was organized by Portland Art Museum. So I've been working really closely with our communications team to generate content to live online. And just this week, I spent 2 hours in the galleries doing a virtual tour, recording myself, talking about the exhibition on my iPhone, and also creating playlists and generating other content to help our external audiences connect with the exhibition ideas. So that's kind of the way that really my role has shifted. We always work on teams and we always work collaboratively to generate content, but in lieu of doing tours with, you know, in the galleries with people, in lieu of doing a gallery talk, we're just finding new and unique ways to help visitors connect with the content that they actually physically can't connect to. So that was an interesting shift, and I really enjoyed it.
And Grace, both sort of, you know, how you feel you personally are changing as you're working with the team.
Sure. I mean, I think again, like that leading with empathy, like really going from being like very task-based to relationship-based, and like that was already happening, but really recentering that. And I think trying to anticipate people's needs as much as possible, and then also just asking them ways to support outside of kind of what our agendas were ahead of time. You know, like all of that's kind of shifted. A lot of the project I work on is very external facing, and so it's been very focused in a lot of ways, and I think our team has been pulling back and looking at how do we support our other departments and each other in different ways, and find new ways to collaborate. So I think also just sharing content and information. Are there spaces where we can, you know, be doing less work because we're working together? So, you know, can we shift what we've been doing and share those resources so that maybe instead of, you know, writing one blog and then, you know, can we combine some things together in order to be responsive? I think has been really helpful. And so for me, it's really been about that kind of like finding different ways to collaborate and like recognizing that because some of the like pre-existing ideas of what work was going to be like for the next 4 months just really need to stop and kind of regather.
Thanks, and I think both Grace and Allison highlight the importance of creativity and thinking outside of the norm has been for this. And Felicity and Marianne, for you both, in your leadership roles, how has it changed your leadership style working today in this virtual reality with teams remotely? Felicity, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this throughout the week, and I realized the biggest shift is actually around this format creates a horizontal space. So when I'm in the physical space, I'm in an office, I'm behind my desk. And when we have team meetings, for example, obviously there's an inherent power dynamic, which I'm really aware of and conscious of. And so, we often take meetings off site and take brainstorming meetings in other rooms to sort of level things out horizontally. And I think that if there's any silver lining around this completely tragic scenario that we're all sort of navigating and pivoting, is that it has created a very horizontal space, and we're all on the same page. We're all in, we're all in this square box beside each other, for lack of a better word. And I think that has sort of enabled a much more informal and friendly and more circular kind of conversation in our team meetings. And we've also been, we've been very sort of upfront about how we're feeling. We're a team of all immigrants from 4 continents, and we have a new person who's Cuban American, so understands the immigrant experience. And so our team meetings have actually been, for probably 3 months, have this need for self-care, or just being open to the conversation not being about work. It's just been navigating things like cancelled trips. Every single person on the team has had a cancelled trip apart from myself, and in terms of going back to their home country. So, it's really been a massive part of what we do. I think the other thing is just having a little bit of fun in terms of the virtual background. We were just talking about that yesterday. We were going to have a competition and see who did the best one. And then we discovered our computers aren't sort of like high enough to do it. And so it's that weird kind of thing where it's, it doesn't totally work, but it's kind of fun. So we just played around with that. And I think laughter has been the biggest part of it. We are trying to bring some joy. We're all sort of really grateful that, our families, so, on the most part are okay, but not all. And so, yeah, I think also me as a leader, just saying, I'm having a really tough day today. I came off 5 video calls. I didn't get a chance to take a break. Please understand I'm not at my highest and best, for lack of a better word. And I think there's a huge compassion and support for each other, because we all know we're navigating that we're not with some of our family members, and that's really hard to navigate.
Thank you. And I think being transparent and compassionate are 2 very key roles in thinking about how we're all working as teams right now. And Marianne, being remote from BARD, from the museum, from your team, from the university, in addition to that, how is that changing your leadership style and thinking of the different aspects of your role at BARD?
So it's interesting, because I think you're hearing, a lot of similar things that are happening in terms of outreach to the community and putting, people first, which of course is always a goal, right? In education and in museum services, we want to put our students first, our visitors first. But this has really brought that into extreme focus. And I think, as others have said, one hopes that it will influence how we move forward in the post, COVID-19 emergency world. I know on the sort of leadership side, being part of the task force, I think I also see the kind of more listening, empathy, all of those things that maybe in a general, weekly meeting, when you're meeting with 5 or 6 different departments, everybody's in the rush to get off to do their work after the meeting. And so there is a lot of understanding going on there. And there's also a lot of sharing, as others have said. I mean, I feel like I've learned, you know, about individual lives that I didn't know before. You know, when you're really, as now, you know, we have a peek into people's homes and their children or their, you know, their pets or their gardens, you know, all of these different things. So I think it's created a more empathetic environment. Also, on the side of the diversity equity aspect, which is a project that we have ongoing at BARD, we're also trying to keep a lot of that in forward movement. So our other task force, which meets around those issues and has a scheduled presentation to our management committee in May, we're trying to keep on that schedule because we know those things are, you know, equally important to what's going on right now.
Thank you. And, you know, I think it's also interesting just to watch us all, you know, normally during Zoom, I think in the past when we're doing a webinar, we're very conscious, like turn off your phone or, you know, don't drink water. It's now, I think we've all become so much more comfortable. And I know, and Felicity was saying earlier, I've been on meetings all morning and I've been talking all morning. And so having a glass of water nearby is important. And I think it does make us all more humane and levels that hierarchy we typically find in teams. How have past crises or past, obviously very few things compare or will compare, hopefully going forward to what we're dealing with now, but how have past crises impacted or inspiring how you're working through the current one? Is there a lesson you learned from the past that you're applying now? And I think I'll turn to Marianne for that one first.
So I guess the other huge emergency that we worked through was 9/11. And at the time I was working in Miami Beach at the Wilsonian. And it was either the first or I think it was the first Art Basel Miami Beach year. And the entire Miami arts community was participating, you know, on the sort of outskirts of that event. And a lot of energy, time, resources had gone into making that event, you know, significant. And then everything just had to come to a crashing halt. But we didn't let that stop us, right? So as today, where we're inward looking perhaps and outward looking, right? So we're dealing with our teams, making sure everyone's safe, they have the equipment they need, the tech support, all of that is happening every day. But we're also looking outward, as others have said, you know, creating new digital content, finding ways for people to see the exhibition, which sadly on Eileen Gray opened just days prior to before our shutdown. And so a lot of us are doing that. So I think, you know, this idea that we can be dynamic and flexible and mobile is the only thing that we can do, and everyone is responding in that way. So that's a lesson from the past, but I think it's now mediated so much more by this interface, you know, having the webinars and all of that, which we didn't do at that time. And so I think we're learning other lessons around this new digital life within the box, as someone said.
And Grace, can you speak to that question?
Sure. I think for me, even just thinking about kind of what the through line is with different crises, it's really the level of uncertainty that I think makes people uncomfortable. And so when thinking about other times where anything's been uncertain, whether that's because you've had a proposal going through and you weren't sure if you were going to get your grant money, I mean, even on those small levels, what are the things that help people function and feel comfortable and feel stable during times of uncertainty? And so I think in that way, turning to transparency, being as upfront and honest about the knowns and the unknowns, you know, what things don't you know yet, but you're waiting on, so that people aren't left to fill in those empty spots with fear. as much as possible. And so I think really thinking through that way, and I've been really grateful to have leaders that have been really upfront and honest about where we are financially at the organization, what that means for our grant projects, what that means for 4 months from now and 6 months from now, as much as they know, and being honest about what they don't know and what the timeline is right now and how it's changing for when that information could be available. I think as much as possible, again, like over communicating, over sharing, and just, yeah, letting people know what's going on in the background.
Thank you. And Allison, can you speak to that question?
Sure. I just want to say, Grace, I feel like your answer was really solid. And I think I haven't experienced something of this level in my professional career before this, so this will be my Art Basel Marianne. But what's interesting is that I feel really supported. I think that we've transitioned very easily to this digital realm. I feel connected with the work that I'm doing. I feel connected with my team. There have been really other fantastic ways to connect. So Four Freedoms has been hosting this daily meditation every day at 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Central. So I can say that just in general, the ways that I personally have been kind of coping with this crisis are just keep doing the things that I do in my daily life to create a sense of stability and calm. And so that's either, just keeping up with the yoga practice or the self-care, making sure that I get outside, all of those things that support me as an individual and ultimately support my role on the team that I'm on.
And Felicity, has a past crisis you've been through helping inform your work, and what was that lesson that you might have learned?
Yeah, so I think I'll speak to our role as an organization a little bit, and then more personally afterwards. But as an organization, we did go through Hurricane Sandy, which had a sort of massive impact not only on our daily operations, but on our everyone in our audience. And so I think in many ways, in terms of being able to mobilize emergency funds very quickly, we were fortunate enough to be able to give out funds very quickly, and because we do grant making all the time, we were able to set that up fairly quickly. And I think a lot of lessons were learned around that. And so we're in that space already, and we're able to just mobilize very quickly and pivot. We had to cancel and postpone a scheduled program where an intensive was supposed to start, realizing that many of the people in this program, in this Emerging Leaders program, they were just not able to function at all. So we ended up just reshifting the schedule completely. I think what's been different this time around in terms of that is we have exactly the same situation where the Emerging Leaders Intensive was about to happen. We've been doing a lot more work online, and we've been doing video conferencing to support our nationwide immigrant artists. And fortunately, we were in a position to pivot very quickly. And I think we've learned a lot of lessons around, again, sort of the space for people to talk, but also adjusting the schedules so it was lighter for people in terms of, people being at home with family responsibilities. So we completely, we kept it going, but we made it half days, which enabled people to be a little bit more flexible. And then we're reassuring people that if and when we get back to being in person, that a lot of the time we took away, we're going to buffer onto it so that they'll get more time to be together in person. But at this point, they haven't met in person, but they are really getting to know each other virtually. And I feel very fortunate that we have these tools that we can step into and activate so promptly and quickly to be able to serve our community.
And in terms of looking in the broader picture, and Allison mentioned, personal well-being and a great streaming yoga class, is there, whether it be art related or cultural related or not, is there an organization or a resource that you find is really leading the way to help us alleviate the stress and the fear of our current reality? Is there, for me, I've been enjoying the streaming Met Opera. I mean, that's a nice release from the norm. It's live-ish music, and so it's almost kind of like not really going out. But is there something you feel has been really inspirational for you? And I'll start with Grace this time.
Sure. I mean, besides all of the fantastic resources that my colleagues are sharing over Slack, which I think gives me a daily boost, and whether those are kind of the fun recreate artwork in your house, you know, Twitter challenges, or looking at all of the online classes that are offered by all kinds of institutions. It's really been fun to try out new things that, you know, I honestly probably wouldn't have been able to do before just because of access. I've been, you know, taking Zumba classes online with my friends from the last place I lived, and having happy hours with those folks. But the other thing I've really been looking to is the resources being put out, particularly around equity and accessibility, because those are organizations that have always been people-centered, have always been about universal design, and that have been giving really good tools and kind of keeping that at the focus. And so any organizations focusing on that, I think, have been particularly helpful because they're centering the things that I've been finding helpful around empathy and compassion, and they have, you know, huge toolkits for doing so. And they're also often, like, you know, lovely, fun people, and so it's always fun to follow them on Twitter. And, you know, I've been taking a course on diversity as an asset, and so they have a lot of fantastic resources. And yeah, so those are some of the focuses I've had.
Allison, outside of the yoga, which I have not been doing, but will, what have you found to be inspirational right now?
Well, I'm reading this book by Naomi Shimada and Sarah Raphael called Mixed Feelings, Exploring the Emotional Impact of Our Digital Habits. And it's a book that I've been kind of just looking through over the past few months, but it feels very important in this moment and very of the moment. So I'm looking at the section that looks at social media and work, and really just kind of the impact that social media or kind of web-based interactions have on daily work styles, and our perception. So that's, I'm just kind of relying on books and tools that look at how to operate in this digital space from people who operate in this digital space all the time. Of course, our people services team has put together an incredible resource kit that has various videos and books, professional development opportunities that we can take that are actually asked of us. So weekly, all of the staff is asked to choose one thing and focus on it. So I feel really excited about being able to dive deep into all of those resources. And of course, the meditation with 4 freedoms and the yoga and all of that.
And Allison, could you repeat the name and the author and the title of the book? We have a question to ask.
Sure. Yes, so the authors are Naomi Shimada and Sarah Raphael, and the book is called Mixed Feelings, Exploring the Emotional Impact of Our Digital Habits.
Thank you. I think everyone I can see is typing it in or writing it down for sure on our panelists here. For Marianne, the same question. What is sort of leading your inspiration right now?
So I guess, in fact, this morning we had a task force meeting and we were discussing the overabundance of Zoom conference meetings in these past 2 weeks. And I think we're just, at least in my optimistic view, you know, we have put out all the fires and we have done many of the things that others have spoken about, and primarily about communicating with everyone, from our maintainers and security people all the way through. We had a full staff and student town hall meeting on Zoom last week. We've done a follow-up questionnaire survey about it. We plan to do another. And I think that in itself showed everyone that we're in it together and that no one is being treated differently. And being able to answer hard-hitting questions was really important. in addition to that, there have also been a lot of fun things. Like we have just launched a video project called One More Thing, and it's similar to what Allison said, and we've asked everyone in our community to do a 1-minute video about an object. I mean, we're material culture studies, so it fits into our brief as a gallery and as an educational institution. We've been doing fun things like match the pet with the owner, questionnaires and other stuff. So that's fun, a little bit of diversion during the day. For myself, I have to say I work, you know, pretty much up until around 6:30 or 7. And so I look forward to watching the PBS NewsHour. And I have to say, I've always loved it because it's really the face of empowered women, starting with Judy and going through all the rest. I mean, there are, of course, male journalists there, but I've always liked it for that. And I think, showing the empowerment of women is really important right now. And I'm seeing it in my own teams, and I'm seeing it in broader teams. And then for real diversion, I just try to go out for a very long hour, at least at the minimum, walk, just to end the day in a much more positive and being in nature kind of moment. So thank you.
And Felicity, the same question to you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking how I'm very fortunate. I do actually have Prospect Park on my doorstep. Literally, I just walk out the door and it's right there. So if ever there was a time I feel very fortunate, I always feel fortunate. It's on my doorstep living in New York City. I just tapping onto Marianne, I just did a similar thing. I just walked around the park. I can only do that the weekdays. Everyone is incredibly good about social distancing in the park right now, but it shifts a little bit at the weekends. But yeah, in terms of leaders, I want to give a bit of a shout out to a past colleague of mine, Courtney Hodge. She's writing a lot on Fractured Atlas. And actually, as I saw this starting to happen, I remembered a conversation we had because they moved to working remotely completely. They're a tech firm, so they were set up for that. And I asked her some advice there. I said, what's that like? And she said, I have a 10-minute daily check-in with my supervisor just to see what the plan is. And she was just talking about that. So I actually reached out to her personally and I asked her, I want to talk about this today. And it was just an incredibly impactful conversation. We talked about what it could look like for our team, how I as a leader of a team could really manage that. And she gave me some really fantastic advice, and it's all on their blog at the moment. So they're pulling together those resources all the time and really sharing their knowledge. And I think one of the biggest things was, yes, we started at the beginning, we had a check-in. We're always having to move it around, and we're being very honest and flexible. It's like, okay, we can't keep this the same time every single day, but just checking in on each other and saying, do you want to, do you not want to? We have one of our team members who just really feels like she needs to be connected. And so we often have open sessions where it's just really fluid. And but yeah, so if people are interested, I'm happy to put that in the chat box, but they really have some great advice to share. And I think the other thing is about being specific and intentional about what those meetings are about. So if it's a daily check-in, we still keep our weekly check-in, which is very expanded. But those daily check-ins, it's just specific, what's urgent, what's necessary, and how you're feeling and what's out there. And it's so we try and keep it, very specific and intentional. And one last comment I wanted to make around managing video conferencing for participants and for your communities. I think that's something that's really helpful with that in terms of programming, being very like, what's the purpose, what's the outcome, and what's the process. And that enables people, it seems to, there's a lot of anxiety around this platform for a lot of people. If maybe they're either new to it or their internet isn't working. And we found that has really helped us manage those programs online. So I wanted to just tap in on that.
Thank you. And we have some great questions coming in, and I'm going to encourage all of our attendees to type in those questions now. And this one, I think, even though it's sort of a manager question, I think each of you could offer your own perspective on it. I'll start with Marianne. This question is, what do you suggest if a manager of a small 5-person team, a museum team specifically, is not really managing at all? You know, there's a few virtual meetings, but, you know, how do you ask that, you know, and encourage upward, that you want to be productive, you want to help and do things? How can you encourage someone to sort of poke them to become a bit more of a leader?
It's interesting because I've actually already experienced this in this past 2 weeks, you know, hearing this from others. And you know, there's 2 answers to it. You know, one is that I think we are already saying there's a flattening of hierarchy here. And so reaching out and saying, I'm here, I'm looking for a task, or I'm doing this, or whatever you need to say to sort of prompt the conversation. I think that's fine, and people should be doing that. On the other hand, we've been very cognizant to say to people, and I've said this myself, if you don't have something to do right now, you shouldn't be worrying about it. And we've actually sent that message down from the top of the organization, because people have a lot of worries. They have self-care, they have family care, they have a lot of things to do. And if right now, in this 2-week time that this has been going on, or a little more, you're not in the hot seat as some of the other managers are, you know, right at the moment, having to make sort of big decisions, you know, use the time for your own benefit. All the curators that I know have projects that they never get to think about. I mean, use the time to daydream even, you know, and to jot down some of your own ideas. I know that's not satisfying, but I guess the point is to say that if you can't get the feedback and you've already made those attempts, then you should just try to use it for your own benefit. That's what I would recommend to my own staff.
And Grace, curious, in your various positions with AAM and with the Metal Museum, what would your sort of thoughts be on that to help this person, to make them feel more included, of course, but also to feel, you know, that they could raise and help inspire leadership?
I mean, I would echo the sentiment to have some honest conversations, and then to be solution oriented as you do that. So, you know, a lot of our managers are, I mean, they're so overwhelmed. Like, they're, you know, they are dealing with very scary things that are also very painful. You know, if people are dealing with layoffs, like, no one wants to lay off the people that they've been nurturing. And so as much as you can provide the platforms, if it's, you know, setting up your own Slack channels and inviting them to be included and finding ways to manage up, setting up your own meetings and inviting them, so they're not necessarily having to do the legwork, they can just agree to the thing that you've proposed. I think that is also really helpful. Sometimes going, I think, to management and just in a panic and asking them to help you create order out of chaos, which sometimes under normal circumstances it's much easier to do if you can be the one helping to create the order. I think that's helpful.
Got to unmute myself. This is specifically for Allison, but I think each of you can answer this in your own way. I know, Grace, you spoke about a blog. Marianne, you spoke about the interactive work Bart is working on, and Felicity, of course, all of the resources NYFA has. How, in terms of how are you thinking of outward outreach, but outward connection to the public and your audiences? Allison specifically was asked, can you describe more about how you recorded your own gallery tour on your iPhone? And were you on camera? Were you not? Sort of how are you thinking through that interaction right now?
Sure. You know, it was interesting. I didn't realize how uncomfortable I would be on camera in the galleries, because I'm generally, I mean, we all have to speak publicly. We all, you know, it's part of the work. But being in the galleries by myself, recording myself, there was too much happening there in terms of seeing myself and all this reflexivity. So I actually focused on the work and did a lot of recording, walking through the galleries, thinking about how someone might physically be in that space and what might be the most beneficial perspectives, views, places to stop. I worked with our communications team also to kind of identify artworks in each section. But I just generated content. You know, I took a few takes when I was on camera, and I trust that our digital team is going to edit it so that it looks good. And really just, you know, gave a few options and tried a few different things. And I sent them the outtakes, and I had fun with it. You know, there were some moments where I talked about being alone in the galleries and how sneaking in is fun, and, you know, just kind of made light of it. But also focused on making sure that the lighting in the galleries was appropriately showing up on my phone so that the artwork could be seen, making sure that I stopped in front of specific artworks and spoke, and then walked through the galleries and spoke. It took about 2 hours. And, you know, also taking into consideration what artworks can and cannot be documented, and making sure that I had a running knowledge of that from our registration team so that I wouldn't create great content that couldn't be used. So it's really just trial and error and having fun and getting comfortable with being in that space.
And further to that, I know Crystal Bridges, Allison, is so great about connecting to the public and connecting to audiences, not just in one location, but in many locations. Has there been direct sort of pointers that you think the museum has been really great that you might want to share in terms of that outreach and in terms of its current effort to be more public and share more and more? And like your curator tour, are there any helpful little hints you might give outside of your personal experience?
Sure. Well, you know, the museum went directly to 2 different focuses, and one is #CB at home, and the other one is #Mo at home, because we just opened the Momentary about 3 weeks before everything was closing, or a month before everything had to close. So I think those 2 platforms have been really helpful. Our communications team also selected artworks and asked some of the curators to pose like the portraits and then take a selfie in their home. So, you know, there have been really fun digital strategies that have been developed to connect. With the Hank Willis Thomas exhibition, returning to that, there's a work called Black Righteous Space, and that work is an interactive video that has an incredible playlist. And so I worked with the studio to get the playlist and then build it on iTunes and shared it with our team so that they can send it out. And, you know, it's finding these various ways that people can connect through video, through audio, through Instagram, all the various social media channels, whatever they're comfortable with. So those are just a few things that our team has been doing to stay connected.
And Marianne, how has BARD been sharing, particularly I know Eileen Gray was just about to open or just opened. How have you been sort of shifting, bringing the art into people's homes on a screen?
So like Allison, we have just recently had one of our graduate student tour guides record a tour, and that's being edited now so that that'll go up on the web, and adding some of the digital content that is physically inside the exhibition. So we're creating some new web pages that will support the Eileen Gray show and, you know, be available for a wider public. And also on the academic side, they've also been releasing more information in terms of research and, you know, taking deep dives into some of our digital content, which has to do with our journals or our published exhibition catalogs. We have a lot of digital material, like many museums, that, you know, is buried in different parts of the website. And we are working with our communications team to aggregate that. And I saw that there was a question on chat about reaching out to youth, for example. And I think some of this in our team, and in fact, we have a new staff member who was supposed to start actually the day that we shut down. And she has started. from the digital divide. And she's a young woman, and she's in the education team. And so she and another person on our communications team have been doing a lot of work around social media outreach, Instagram, and also this development with our web team on new outputs over the website.
And Felicity, in terms of thinking of youth specifically, do you have advice or ideas on engaging young people and the work of NYFA or your fellows in that sense?
Yeah, so ultimately we don't have any youth specific programs, but we are, I think I would say, the platform where we connect to youth the most is through Instagram. And we actually are doing a spotlight on our current immigrant artists who are participating in a mentoring program. They're spotlighting each one at 11 o'clock every day. And that was a way to help raise their profile, because unfortunately a lot of immigrant artists can't access a lot of the funds that are available. So we're trying to find another way to support them. And yeah, at the moment, NYFA is giving a lot of access free. There may be some of you who advertise on NYFA's job board, but all our listings are free. So we're able to support opportunities. So if, for example, if an artist is doing programming for youth, now they can advertise for free. And so for the time being, all our job board, our opportunity, our spaces are being offered for free. So I hope that we can serve you through all the great work that a lot of our artists are doing, because many of them are teaching artists and a lot of them work in that space. And hopefully they're going to be able to profile all of those services that we do.
And turning to Grace, I think being at AAM and in the role that you are in at AAM, and thinking about a larger question for the museum field, while we're doing all of this great tours and all of this new digital content, how do you recommend or what do you suggest for a small team that's under a lot of pressure to produce all of this digital initiatives and stay relevant and not disappear and be on everyone's, follow all the social media threads, and how and it's causing a lot of stress. I think Marianne mentioned like letting people know it's okay just to have nothing to do. Or the question being posed is they're just not sure how to encourage leadership to be more empathetic around releasing some of that stress, and that being relevant to every hashtag that's out there isn't important. Do you have advice how they might approach that to balance it?
Sure. I know one of the things that we're doing at AAM is, while we are generating original content, we're spending a lot of time uplifting other content. So you don't always have to be the creator of the content. This can be an opportunity to uplift community voices and have other people using your platforms to share what they're doing, and which is also really great for community building. And not everyone has the platforms to do that kind of sharing. So if you can encourage other people to participate, then you aren't carrying necessarily the burden of creating everything. And I think that's been really helpful. And I think that's important work to be doing anyway, that everything doesn't have to come from inside of our walls, or in this case, inside of our box, that there's a lot of interesting things happening around us. And we could also just be a conduit for sharing those things. And that's a little bit easier to do than necessarily having to create everything yourself.
And do other panelists have a suggestion for that question as well? Allison, Felicity, or Marianne?
I would echo everything that Grace said. I think that really sums it up. So many people, our communications team has jumped in with a series of blogs related to all of the things that are coming up, like wellness, like things around artists really wanting to understand how they can communicate their work and their practice online. And so we're creating content all the time. So I think I would agree completely that retweeting, resharing, and tagging. If we see that someone tags us, our communications team is fabulous about acknowledging that, and so you're building community beyond and beyond. So yeah, absolutely.
Marianne or Allison, anything else to add to that?
Well, we have a lot of, partnerships going on right now, just in the course of our work. So we have a teen program. We have a project that we're doing with one of the CUNY community colleges. So different things like that. So we've been, very cognizant to keep everyone informed the same way as we have with staff and others. And some things we've had to shift from physical meetings or visits and exhibitions, in fact, for one, to the digital platform. So we're all working very hard to make sure that our community, the wider community that engages with us, is also benefiting from all of this new work that we're doing on the digital platform.
Thank you. And we're nearing about 9 minutes left. So if there's any urgent questions out there, please make sure you're looping them in now. And this is going to be a very tough question, I think. I think it's speaks to what we all know is already starting to happen, but will continue to happen likely. And I'll read the exact wording of the question. For small institutions that are going to take a significant financial hit from the pandemic, how can we lead our teams effectively in the midst of very serious and very real concerns about layoffs and curatorial project budgets being cut? I think perhaps anyone who wants to jump in and try to tackle that real, very heavy but very real question.
I'm happy to start in as I said before, working through the 9/11 crisis. And, today it's really different. We were talking about it just recently, how after 9/11, some of the exhibitions, because Bard Graduate Center does not have a collection, so all of our exhibitions are collaborations with lenders, other public institutions primarily. And everything worked out at that time. Some of the loans we were concerned about, all of those kinds of things, eventually everything fell into place. But right now there's so much uncertainty. I mean, when we are even going to go back to work, right? Today, I think the PMA in Philadelphia said that they don't see them going back to work until July 1. So in that sense, they're kind of following what the Met had already said. And I think obviously the anxiety is there, but I think we all just need to, work on the things we can work on and be prepared for different outcomes. I mean, the prospect of losing one's job is real for many people, and I know you can't minimize that anxiety. So I think people need to be able to talk about it, and that's where the transparency of the administration is critically important, and people need to feel like they can reach out and ask those kinds of serious questions. It's hard for everyone. As someone said before, it's hard for the administrators who have to maybe consider layoffs of people they've worked with for years. So it's, everyone is feeling that same kind of anxiety. And I think we just need all of the tools that we've said to deal with our own physical, emotional, spiritual anxieties, and as well as to communicate, whether it's up or across or however within your own institution, to feel more secure. But I don't think we can say, and any of us say, that there are definitive answers out there. So everyone just has to be prepared for this uncertain future.
I'll just add that, early on, our leadership team was very transparent about budget cuts, and that was extremely helpful. So it came from the top exactly that what we need to look at cutting, and then different teams are working through what potentially could be shifted in the exhibitions that are planned in the future, in terms of loans and other ways that we can cut costs. But I've heard this word transparency quite a bit today, and I feel like it's a really great word to just focus on for the best way to move forward. Because for me, from my perspective, knowing that certain things are going to be cut, knowing that we are attacking this right away has been a really successful way forward in managing expectations and projects.
Grace?
And I would just kind of add on to that, and again, along the vein of transparency, I think sometimes we're afraid to share plans because they're not solid yet, or because we haven't made a final decision. But I think even being transparent in that, if there are 4 options, that there are 4 scenarios that you're looking at, like, share all of them. Like, I think at this point, like, more information is going to be better, because people have to prepare for their individual lives as well. And then if those things are coming, making some of those resources readily available, and being able to help people transition. And whether that's just making sure that they know they can come to you for a letter of reference, that they know that they, here are the resources if they need to apply for unemployment, have never done that before, and that's scary. Like, those things that you can help ease for your people, I think is going to be helpful too.
I'm happy to talk about, again, we have a team of directors, and we've been able to be quite transparent about what we're doing in the back, whether that's applying for loans, applying for grants, just in terms of recognizing that our earned income and our support has drastically reduced. But also we are pivoting certain roles that, so for example, if somebody's somebody's taking care of the office and being at the front desk, for example, that's a role that has actually been shifted into helping with all the emergency grants that we're starting to have to manage. And so we're actually trying to be very, for lack of a better word, entrepreneurial in terms of shifting roles, so so that we can sustain. So there's maybe 3 or 4 people who are in that situation where, we are asking them to shift, and it, the reality is that's the best way forward at the moment. But definitely we're trying to be as transparent and upfront that we're doing everything possibly in our power to maintain and sustain the organization, while also, again, sort of, it's almost like the open door policy, that people can ask questions. And the leveling out of this conferencing way of being has actually really helped people being able to ask questions, for wherever they are in the organization, whatever level. It's created a very open space. And so I think hopefully that's been helpful to our staff as a whole.
Thank you. And as we're nearing the closing minutes, I wonder if there's any sort of last thoughts each of you would like to offer. I know for me, what has been leading AAMC is to communicate and to care. Those are the 2 things that are leading everything that we're doing. And I am also very grateful that we embraced, fortunately, a lot of technology before this occurred for us. So I don't know if you all want to say something that you are very grateful for at the moment with your organization, and also perhaps something that you feel is going to be your sort of personal vision statement moving through the crisis. Grace?
Sure. I'm really grateful that our department centers equity. I mean, we're in the inclusion department, and I'm really grateful that our leadership has made a lot of tools available to us so that the transition's been easier, and has really been thinking ahead and being very transparent. We're using like internal Confluence pages where all of the information is there for all the teams, so you have access to everything, whether you need it right now or not, or you want to go back and reference it. And I think the thing that I've been thinking a lot about, Desiree Attaway said, we are not working from home, we are at home during a crisis trying to work. And I think for me, that shifting of perspective was really important. These aren't normal times. We're not just normally teleworking in the same way families aren't normally homeschooling. Like, that's not actually what's happening. We're doing crisis management the best we can in the spaces that are available to us. And so just kind of keeping that in mind.
Allison?
I really echo a lot of what Grace said. I've been able to transition very easily from the physical office to the virtual space. So for me, I'd say that's probably what I'm most grateful for. And I'm actually, the position I've taken personally is to not think so much about the crisis, because I feel that it can be very overwhelming to try to understand it. So I'm really just trying to embrace some really, a lot of patience and some flexibility, and trying to maintain a sense of calm. So I'm actually staying away from a lot of the media. I'm only getting information as I need it, really managing the sources of information that I'm receiving, and trying to maintain a sense of normalcy in my daily life. So if that means getting dressed, you know, deciding to actually get dressed for a day is really important, you know, taking lunch breaks, those kinds of things.
And Marianne, yeah.
I just wanted to add that I think this reflects some of the things that have already been said, but the sort of the overarching idea of trust, and that this has, you know, allowed us to trust, you know, people, our staffs. You know, a lot of teams don't like that people work from home, you know, or have some kind of anxiety around, like, if you're home, you're not really doing all the work, and who knows, you know, I don't know. But I think this has really leveled that out, and people have a great sense of trust around people's responsibility, their commitment to the job, their commitment to the, you know, the organization as a whole. And people have really stepped up to offer, you know, filling in different ways that they can. In fact, when people don't feel like they have their own project to do, or there are people, you know, in the museums who have physical work to do, they don't have work to do online. So how can we help them participate in ways that they've never participated before? And they have, and they of course have wonderful ideas, and they're really eager to help. So I think we have to trust that basic instinct that people are in your organizations, they want to be there, and they want to work, and they want to contribute, and we should, you know, allow that.
And Felicity, to close us out, do you want to share the same?
Yeah, I want to echo so much of what everyone said. I mean, there's so much fear and anxiety, and there's so much, you know, all around us, and with our community that we work with, and our staff. And Grace, one of my core values is grace, and it's part of our team core values. And when I say grace, I just mean, you know, that ultimately, you know, these things, that mistakes here and there or things like that, nothing really matters at the moment in terms of, you know, having grace for each other's situations and scenarios, and compassion. And I think that's the thing that's really landing on me at this time, and just being really compassionate to everyone as much as possible, because we don't know what's going on in people's lives and how stressed out they are.
So on that note, I want to thank all of our panelists, all of our attendees for asking really great questions, and for our panelists for being so thoughtful and generous and honest. And I think that's wonderful. In our chat, we have sort of our next webinar that's coming up, sharing that information. And please do be in touch, whether you're an attendee or a panelist, with follow-up questions. We're happy to share and
Happy to
disseminate that information. And so thank you, everyone. And
thank
please,
you for having us.
thank you. Stay well and stay healthy.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judith.
Thanks.
Thank you.